What if there was an all-in-one way to burn your body fat, to build muscle, to optimize your health, your productivity, your energy, your stress, your sleep, and a whole lot more? What if there was a way of customizing the latest and fanciest and best protocols to your unique biochemistry and, more importantly, to the constraints of your lifestyle and your specific goals? Well, I'm pleased to say that that system now exists. And in today's episode, we will be diving deep into exactly what it is and some of the often overlooked principles when it comes to diet, nutrition, and overall health optimization. Hi, I'm Nick Urban, host of the Mind Body Peak Performance podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Wade Lightheart. Wade is a certified sports nutritionist advisor and president/director of education and co-founder of BiOptimizers. As a plant-based and drug-free athlete for more than 2 decades, Wade is a 3-time national natural bodybuilding champion who competed in both the IFBB Mr. Universe and the INBA Natural Olympia by the age of 31. At the age of 50, Wade came out of retirement to win the Open Men's and Grand Masters categories at the INBA Ironman International, then competed at the PNBA Natural Olympia. As we discuss, 6 months later, Wade successfully ran his first marathon in 4 hours, a feat that you rarely see bodybuilders accomplishing. Today, we're discussing Wade and his co-founder Matt Gallant's latest work called The Ultimate Nutrition Bible. I have it in front of me. I've read about 150 pages so far, and it is quite comprehensive, as you'll see in the show. If you want to check out the previous episode I recorded with his co-founder Matt, you can go to mindbodypeak.com/92. Today's episode you'll find at mindbodypeak.com/130. In the show notes, you'll find the links to the resources of everything we discuss. Wade and Matt arranged for an exclusive offer for my listeners. If you go to ultimatenutritionsystem.com/Nick Urban, in addition to the 10% discount you get by using my code Nick Urban, you'll also unlock special bonuses and gifts with your purchase. You won't find this deal anywhere else on the internet. It's only available at ultimatenutritionsystem.com/Nick Urban, and it's for a limited time only. So go there right now, grab your book and your free gifts. Once again, the link to that will be in the description of this episode. And if you want to check out any of the other products that BiOptimizers carries, you can use the code URBAN, and that'll save you 10% as well. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Wade Lightheart. Wade, welcome to Mind Body Peak Performance.
Dude, great to be here.
It is great to host you. And you guys sent me over your Ultimate Nutrition Bible recently, and I dug into it expecting to learn the intricacies of nutrition. And I quickly realized it is your 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss style. You come for the nutrition, you leave with a whole operating system on how to live a better life. So I would love to chat about this with you today.
Excited to get into it.
All right, let's start off with the unusuals or non-negotiables you've done for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony.
Okay, great question. So this morning I got up, did my energization exercises, which would be kind of like a chi energy kind of thing. I did a neurovisor treatment. I don't know if you guys have used that. That's a cool device to kind of get myself in a really nice brain state. I did a nano V with a cloud PEMF machine to kind of get my electromagnetics in the right space. Then went down to the gym, walked to the gym, weight training workout, walked back, and then had a really nice protein shake and some fruit this morning for breakfast. So get my mind in the right state, get my body in the right state, and then fuel up, I guess would be the those are kind of my standards every morning, you know?
Yeah, and you've pulled out all the fancy biohacks and also done some of the basics. I love that you also just not only do you go to the gym, but you also walk to and from, and that's a great way to get in some extra movement. And movement is so much more than just burning fat and calories. And we'll talk about that in this podcast as well, also. But tell me about your background a bit. I know about it, but I want you to share that with listeners so they understand who they're talking with.
Yeah. So, I'm a kid that grew up in rural Canada, hunting, fishing, all that sort of stuff. I lived, it was, as a teenager, it was 5 miles to my nearest neighbor in the middle of the woods my parents were the caretakers of a private resort. So, I'd wake up with, deer or moose looking in the window and, at a lake. And so I grew up in a very rural environment. That's where I got started into lifting weights. I built a gym in my garage, or it wasn't a garage. It was actually a barn, and, old school Rocky style with the pulleys and, things like that. And the old York dumbbells, the cement sets, and I created my own pulleys and things like that. So I started training that way naturally because I read about Arnold Schwarzenegger and saw this guy that was, at the top, the biggest movie star in the world, and he had all these muscles and he was making all this money, and he had won all these Olympics. I was like, man, I want to live in California and have a great body and go to Mr. Universes myself. And so that kind of spawned my dream. And from there, I went to exercise physiology at the University of New Brunswick, was really unimpressed. I remember in my fourth year asking my exercise physiologist, I had been doing I've been experimenting with high intensity training at the time. And over the course of about 3 months, I had dropped my resting heart rate by about 10 beats per minute. And I went to my exercise physiology professor and I said, hey, why do you suppose this is happening? Now, this is back like in 1993, 94, a long time ago. And he couldn't tell me.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like, this is my professor and he doesn't know this. So from that point, I took it on a mission myself, just find people who are producing great results and learn from them. And, went through every aspect of the nutrition industry. Eventually, got to represent my country at the Mr. Universe contest. And then Matt and I started a company after that, trying to help bodybuilders avoid the pitfalls of the industry. And then eventually that evolved into BiOptimizers years later. And so, it's been an awesome journey. And, now I'm up in my 50s and now I'm playing the optimal aging program.
Optimizing not just the longevity or the years you have on this planet, but the quality of that, which you guys call, I believe, BioSpan.
BioSpan, yes. In other words, how healthy can you live as you age? So we believe, if you look at the advances, probably mostly from medical surgeries, let's say, at a life expectancy in the 1960s of about 67 years old, and it's about 80 from there. It's now on the decline thanks to, the reliance on pharmaceuticals, but we peaked at 80. And I think most of that was just surgery intervention that stopped people dying that would have died before, like cardiovascular cancers, things like that. Basically, you got a 20% bump. So I believe that if you start using some of the technologies and strategies, leveraging epigenetics, nutrigenomics, like, dealing with your suboptimal genetics through lifestyle intervention, that we can probably extend life expectancy into the mid 90s and a healthy version of that. So instead of spending the last 25% of your life in a really painful, slow decrepit, declining aspect of yourself, that you're living pretty well and pretty strong and pretty vibrant until, okay, the numbers came up on the cereal and God's like, all right, you're done, get out. So, and then of course, some people are going to go beyond 100. So, depending on, what their potential is.
Yeah. It's really interesting. If you take the average lifespan of humans, or I guess maybe the median lifespan of humans a while back, and you account for the deaths that occurred during childbearing, and you filter out the deaths that occurred due to a poor sanitary environment, the lifespan back then was actually surprisingly long. And like, it's really those two main factors that are what made it so much shorter, and why we think of like older humans as having shorter lifespans.
Perception has been shaped by a variety of institutions and their funding partners. And it's to a certain outcome that may not necessarily be for the person's health and well-being. It might be actually that perception is benefiting, the latest medical intervention that you just need that's been, supported by your government agency.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that the old systems of medicine, I've talked about traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda on this show a fair bit. One of the core principles of all the old systems is digestion. And I know that you guys have focused on that heavily. I'm not sure if it's because you guys also looked into some of those old systems or if it's out of personal need. Why did you focus on digestion and why does it matter?
We've started most of our things because of a problem. In other words, when I came out of the my first Mr. Universe contest in 2003, and keep in mind, I was doing if it fits your macros version of dietary strategy. I had one of the world's best bodybuilding coaches. So we're only looking at a macro strategy. Like, are you getting enough protein? How many carbohydrates? How low body fat intake? And I was then adapting that to a vegetarian diet. Now, and that was really difficult in 2003. So yeah, I did. I won my national titles and got to the Mr. Universe. But after the Mr. Universe, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. Okay. Like, don't try this at home. I literally completely wiped out my digestive system. I didn't know anything about reverse dieting. I didn't know about, most bodybuilders were using hormonal augmentation under that type of diet. I wasn't. I was, natural, wasn't taking any testosterone or any other, supportive pharmaceuticals that are common within the industry. And I met a doctor, and that doctor was Dr. Michael O'Brien, and he changed my life. And I went to him and I said, hey, here I'm at this aesthetic ideal Mr. Universe contest, which you think because you look a certain way, you're healthy, and it might be the absolute opposite of that. And I said, what do I know? And he told me something that changed my life. He said, Wade, you learned to build the body from the outside in. I'm going to teach you to build the body from the inside out. And he introduced me to the concept of digestive health and how your digestive system worked, particularly around enzymes, probiotics, hydrochloric acid, amino acids, minerals, all these things that my nutrition training, my university education, the top coaches in the field that I was in, none of these guys were talking about this in 2003. And so I followed his regimen, which was taking high dosages of enzymes, probiotics, special amino acids, and some minerals. And 6 months later, I got my body back. But more importantly, I never felt better. And I was like, wait a minute. This is a whole different ball of wax. And so from there, Matt and I, he also did it. Matt being a keto guy and I'm being a plant-based guy. So, there's an interesting topic. But we both couldn't deny the effect of improving our digestive system on our performance. And so we decided that we'd start producing really high-end digestive health products because we saw that the coming problems with digestion were only going to get worse with the modern food supply. And that turned out to be true.
Yeah. Let's double click into that and talk about all those factors, the amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals, the probiotics, and the enzymes, because I think vitamins and minerals are starting to become more mainstream, as are essential amino acids. You said that you use special amino acids. So I'm curious to hear what those are and also how that whole system came together and why you'd settled on that of all things. Of course, it was following his protocol, but why you think those are the things that really move the needle?
At that time, I was taking 250 grams of protein a day, common, so it was a little bit more than a pound or 1 gram per pound of body weight. And we were using protein as a satiety factor on a calorie reduced diet. I realized that everybody in the nutrition industry was making a common fallacious assessment. And that is, they think if you put a gram of protein in your body, that you're getting a gram of amino acids delivered to your muscles. It's not true because, first off, we know that when you're a young child, your digestive ability tends to be better than someone who's a senior citizen. So we have a digestive system. It's a single canal from your mouth to your butt. And you eat that food. The food isn't in the cells where you need it. It's in that tube. It's not actually in you. The tube is in you, but it's not in your cells. So upon learning that, I realized, wait a minute, am I really getting 250 grams of protein or 250 grams of aminos? First off, I don't need protein. I need amino acids. My body needs amino acids. It uses amino acids to build things. Okay. Well, what would happen if I started improving my digestive system, the efficiency and effectiveness of my digestive system? How much protein would I actually need to be successful in a sport that is primarily dependent on how much amino acids you can deliver to your muscles, not protein? And that's a big misidentification. So it took me 4 years to figure that out. I optimized my digestion first using what I shared with you. But 4 years later, I went back to the World Championships, eating only 85 grams of protein a day. So 250 grams was definitely too much because it wasn't working with my digestive system. And 85 grams was sufficient when I had a perfectly working system. So the average person somewhere in between of that, depending on how much digestive distress that they have. And so I was able to prove this with myself. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to start advocating this now.
To add some context, proteins are made of a bunch of different amino acids and different ratios of them, and each protein has different ratios and therefore like different protein quality scores. And no shade against vegans or vegetarians or anything, but a lot of people will consider those proteins to be lower quality because they don't have certain as anabolic amino acids, like lower concentrations of leucine and the other BCAAs and some of the EAAs. So it sounds like with this approach, you're able to absorb more of those EAAs and BCAAs and other aminos, even though you're not getting as high concentrations as you would from like a grass-fed whey protein or something.
Well, the reason that we wrote the book, The Ultimate Nutrition Bible, is to expose the biases of ignorance. So for example, people say, well, you can't get all the essential amino acids from a plant-based diet. Plant-based diets are all essential amino. It's all the amino acids that we don't produce ourselves. So you say, well, if you're on a plant-based diet, those are incomplete proteins. No. If you're on an animal-based diet, it's an incomplete protein. But if you're on a plant-based diet, it's not incomplete protein. You have all the amino acids that you don't produce.
Yeah. And you're eating multiple foods at the same time. So you're getting different amino acids from different foods.
Well, this is part of another assumption that I'm not so sure is true. Here's the thing. There's not a lot of vegan or vegetarian athletes. And because of that, people say, because it's uncommon, therefore it's a truth. And I'm a contrarian by nature. So I'll put my hand up on that one. And I'm not here to put down plant or like meat eaters or anything like that. I'm here to challenge these beliefs, because if you have a belief that's not based in reality, but it's based on conjecture and commonality, you're destined to make the same mistakes over and over again. And what I found is this: most vegans and vegetarians eat poor diets, just like most meat eaters eat poor diets. But there's been a common movement around consuming consistent amounts of animal proteins or whey proteins or protein supplement. Whey protein came in. Animals have been around forever, but why did whey protein come in, for example? Well, because people weren't consistent enough with their meat consumption, or eating that much meat was not as easy as, having a shake and some protein as a supplement once or twice a day. So people have a hard time like sorting through the nuances even of what's working for them and why it's working. Yeah. So I believe that certain types of people will be more predisposed to having success on an animal-based diet. Some people will do well on beef. Some people can't have beef. Some people can do well on fish and chicken, and some people need to go to like lamb and goat, or some people can only eat bison. And all of that, I believe, is going to come down to, your genetics, your epigenetics, your dietary sensitivity, and your psychological conditioning. And do not underestimate your subconscious psychological beliefs that bleed into the effectiveness of any diet. And I had to overcome these. I thought when I went to a plant-based diet, I grew up hunting, fishing, living in the woods, and I wanted to experiment. And I remember the trepidation psychologically that I couldn't get enough protein on a plant-based diet. And I did a 2-week experiment, and then I did another 2-week experiment on a plant-based diet. And then I went 2 months. No knowledge, no understanding, zero sophistication, but I felt good, and I didn't shrink up and blow away like, all of my friends thought. And I was in, the bodybuilding community, probably the most aggressive, condemnative community that you could get as far as dietary regulation. And I said, no, I'll try this. And I felt good. And then that was it. I just started experimenting with the plant-based diet more and more, not as a way to say, hey, everybody needs to be plant-based, just as I want to see if this is actually true or not. And I made all the mistakes too. So,
Yeah. So when you cut down from 200 plus grams of protein, 250 grams of protein a day to 90, why did you do that? And you mentioned that there's issues with consuming too much protein, or I guess you alluded to that. And that's like the pendulum has swung the opposite way now. And it's like protein is seen as this magic nutrient that helps rebuild. It also satiates appetite. And like now there's like a lot of people consuming 200 plus who don't necessarily need 200 plus. Why did you cut down to 90? And even though you could be getting more?
Well, that was because I wanted to see where did I actually start seeing a physiological effect. In other words, when I was training at in my mid 30s at a world championship level, so between the ages of 31 and 35, which is pretty much your peak in your muscle building sophistication level, and that's not hormonally augmented. Okay, I want to be clear about that. And a lot of people that, if you're jacking up your protein content, but you're on 1,000 milligrams a week of testosterone, which is increasing your protein synthesis, well, you're distorting the amount of information you're going there. Or you're like Ronnie Coleman that has like, no mTOR gene or something. You know what I mean? Like you can't take genetic outliers, and you can't take hormonally assisted people and apply that to regular people. Okay. And that's another mistake people make. But when I went to that level, I was like, okay, at what point do I start to see a loss of lean body mass training at the highest level that you can, in that sport? And for me at that time, 85 grams is when I started to notice the drop off. I felt that around 100, it gave me a little bit of a move, because you never know exactly what it is. You think it's 85 grams. Maybe it is. Maybe you didn't quite get that right. Maybe that protein wasn't perfect. 100 was really nice. And, even today, when I came back and did the world championships last year at 50, I was still eating about 120 grams. So I had a little bit more, and largely in part just because the way my food broke down over I was eating 4 meals. Back then I was eating 5 meals, and I was doing different supplementation. This time I changed it a little bit as my diet has gotten more sophisticated as I've gotten older. I'm less, hormonally as strong as I was in 30, still not on TRT or anything like that. Not that I have anything against that, but under the competition rules, I couldn't use any of those agents. So I now use fiber, and this will correlate with your other question. I now use fiber as a satiety factor. So why is protein king? In my opinion, it is the satiety factor that allows people to maintain their calories in, calories out model to create a long-term calorie deficit without overtly throwing out their satiety factor. And as a plant-based guy, it's really hard to get that type of volume of plants into your body. And what I found, though, you can use fiber to boost the satiety and still get the same effect. And I have a suboptimal gene around satiety, which means I don't get the signal soon enough to stop eating. So I'll overeat real easily. I love eating.
It's interesting how our genes, they're not deterministic in a lot of cases, but they can really explain clues as to like things that we know or in some cases don't know. Like, yeah, I know that if I pick up a cookie, I'm going to eat the whole box without blinking, and then I'll realize I ate the whole thing and I'll feel bad about it. And if I know that if I like take a genetic analysis test and I understand that about myself, then I can make a better decision knowing that and like, okay, I see this, how these two combine. But without that knowledge, without understanding it, it can be a lot harder, and you might just feel like a bad person for making that mistake.
Well, a couple things that we talk about, and you brought up a couple things. In our book, we talk about the pyramid of nutritional decisions. And at the base of that is spiritual and cultural commitments, as well as emotional and psychological needs. So emotional and psychological needs can be as much neurochemistry as traumatic events or positive events. So like the social connection, between shared meals. So when I go out with my friends, I want to eat like crazy because that was a time of celebration. But if I'm locked into a goal that's really important to me, I have no problem of going out to a public event and not touching anything. If I don't have that goal, I don't flip the switch on my importance of values. So, Matt, my business partner, he doesn't like that. Like I can go, I think last year I went, 18 months dieting, where Matt is the kind of guy who he needs a little reward once a week or he finds it's too restrictive. I'm more cyborg-like when I get onto something. I'm just excited about something really hard and difficult, and that makes me just, deal with that. So understanding, and then, maybe there's spiritual and cultural lens. I got friends who are Hindus. I got friends who are Muslims, and I have friends who are Jews, and they have very specific dietary practices based on their spiritual and cultural beliefs. Well, you have to be able to build that into your nutrition model and say, well, hey, sorry, dude, you're a Hindu, but you got to start eating meat. That's not going to fly. The cost to him as a human or her as a human isn't enough to maintain their cultural commitments. So how do you work within that and optimize within that? And we provide that inside of the books. And of course, we got a lot of things else on the pyramid, but those are a couple factors that I don't think a lot of nutrition books consider. And you get that feeling, just what you said. I'm bad. I'm not doing this right. This isn't working for me. I'm different somehow. I'm dysfunctional. I'm not good enough. Whatever that subconscious psychological programming that got laid down in that you don't even know when that happened now comes up to affirm why something's not going to work for you.
And also, I like that you're able to take that, like, say, palette of different like satiety signals and say you're not getting as much protein. And so then you increase the fiber and you influence the different like hormonal pathways that are associated with hunger and satiety based on like what you have, like what tools you have at your disposal. Like, for example, if someone's allergic to eggs, you're not going to be like, oh, well, eggs are a superfood, so you should eat as many eggs as you can because like it doesn't make sense. So it's nice that you guys take that nuance into consideration that like there's a hierarchy here of the importance of nutritional constraints, and if you don't follow them, it's not going to apply.
Correct.
Okay, so now let's go back to enzymes. We talked about that a little bit, and they seem like this magical substance that allows you to change your macros and get some of the benefits of having different levels. And I became interested in enzymes probably about 5 years ago, and of course, I found you guys through that. But what is the role of enzymes, and why do you guys care so much about them?
Well, enzymes and probiotics are essentially the only two things in your body that does any work. So everything from thinking to blinking requires an enzymatic activity. There's over 25,000 different enzymes in the body that we know of, and probably thousands of more that we don't. Now, when it comes to the role of digestion, you have essentially four main categories: proteases, which digest protein; amylases, which digest carbohydrates; lipases, which digest fats; and cellulases, which digest plant matter. Humans are the only species, well, now probably our pets, that eat cooked food. Now, all cooked food, those enzymes are the difference between stones, plants, and people. Stones don't have enzymes, plants do, people have a lot. The enzymes that we produce allow us to convert one thing into another at an accelerated rate. So, to convert what you eat into energy units or building blocks, the start of that process, the catalyst for that process, is enzymes. Now, everybody probably knows somebody that is lactose intolerant. What is that? That means that you do not have the lactase enzyme. Somebody probably knows someone who's gluten intolerant. That's because they don't make an enzyme called dipeptidyl peptidase 4 that breaks down gluten. Similarly, I have come to believe, with my experience of coaching thousands of people over the last 30 decades, or particularly the last 20 years when I got into the enzyme conversation, is that I believe that people are developing or I think it's getting worse, suboptimal enzymatic pathways inside the body. So in other words, someone who is suboptimal in producing proteases to break down protein might find that eating protein heavy foods doesn't sit well with them, or they don't feel good on it. Or they may also notice that they are prone to cognitive problems because they're not able to convert the protein into the amino acids into the neurotransmitters. And that might be enzymes, that might be probiotics. We can get into that in a minute. Also, people who have suboptimal blood sugar profiles often are limited in amylase production. People who are prone to gallbladder situations or problems processing fats often have lipolytic or lipase deficiencies. People who aren't able to break down plants very well, that they take a little bit of vegetables and they feel awful, often have low cellulase. I do believe that much of this is caused by massive exposure to biochemicals which disrupt enzymatic activity. Herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides all work by destroying enzymatic pathways on those agents. So if that's on our food, it's likely destroying enzymatic pathways which are in our body. And why do I say pathways? Well, what I've come to notice is that if you take a person who has suboptimal blood sugar on a glucose, monitor, and I don't change anything in their diet, but I add amylase enzymes before they eat every meal, their blood glucose levels improve. If I give someone who has trouble with their neurotransmitters or breaking down protein, and I give them proteolytic enzymes, they don't feel digestive distress after. If I have someone that feels sick when they eat different types of fats and I give them an array of lipase enzymes, suddenly they can have that fat without the digestive discomfort. We'll also see that lipase person often will have skin conditions. So we give them lipase and the skin condition goes away. We give the people protease and their mood starts to improve. We give people amylase and their blood sugar improves. So you're giving them a digestive enzyme, but I believe that any enzyme that's not being used becomes reabsorbed and deployed in the system. And why do I say that? Well, you take enzymes, and I've taken up to 1,000 in a day as an experiment. I am extreme. Guess what? You never find the enzymes in the stool. So what is not being used becomes reabsorbed and redeployed in the system. And I believe that there's family of enzymes that become deployed throughout the system. That's a theory. It's not proven. However, When people hyperdose in these different types, I've seen benefits in these other areas of their life that don't seem connected to their digestion, which is what leads me to that theory. Hopefully, one day we'll be able to prove that.
Very cool. Yeah, I was actually thinking that like if you're consuming, say, glucose or starches or something, and you take a enzyme that's going to break down those, are you going to get a bigger blood sugar spike because you're going to be absorbing more of that and you're going to like store more of that as fat, or is it going to have the opposite effect? And you just answered that.
Yeah, well, again, there could be variances because there's enzymes are only one stage of the digestive process. You got enzymes, you got hydrochloric acid, and then you got your probiotics. So you could have a dysbiosis of the bacteria. You may have suboptimal levels of hydrochloric acid, or you may have deficient enzymes. And oftentimes there'll be some combination of all three, depending on what level of dysfunction that a person has. Usually, if you're finding that you're pre-diabetic or diabetic or whatever, you've got multiple problems already before it shows up at that level. And that's the problem with a lot of our medical testing right now is we're getting the info way too late in the story.
Okay, so you have this category of enzymes, the digestive enzymes that you mentioned, but then there's a whole nother category. It's called the proteolytic enzymes, or maybe not a whole different category, but a whole different use case at least.
That's right. So proteolytic enzymes will be active in certain pH ranges. So when we started looking at building enzymes, we realized that most companies were just throwing in some protease. Well, what does that mean? Well, does it work at 6.0 pH? Does it work at 4.5 pH? Does it work at 3.0 pH? Because when food enters into the upper cardiac portion of the stomach, you got 30 to 60 minutes in a normal case before the hydrochloric acid comes in. And that's when the enzymes present in the food are supposed to start breaking it down. But again, humans are the only population that doesn't eat raw food. We eat almost all our food cooked. So the problem with that is now our body goes, oh, we don't have enzymes to break this down. We start manufacturing as an adjunct, not as a preemptive piece. If I'm a bear and I eat a raw salmon or raw blueberries, I get the enzymes present in that to help assist in the process as it goes into my body. The heat, the temperature starts increasing the speed of the turnover rate and the activation of the enzymatic activity. A herbivore will only eat plants because its digestive system has the enzymes for plants. A carnivore will only eat meat. And so we haven't thought about these things very well because it just becomes normal. And then, of course, now we're getting multi-generational dysfunctioning passed on. So I do believe if you look at the canines, the length of the digestive system and the nervous system response to jetting blood, or the response to a fruit tree orchard, that the natural digestive response would be roots, plants, and fruits and nuts. But I think that humans' patterns of eating are so far gone from our original destination that isn't even a possibility for a lot of people unless they made massive corrective aspects to their lifestyle, which might not even be possible at this stage.
And a lot of foods also have been like pasteurized and like heated, and which kills the enzymes. And I know, for example, I used to not be able to handle any milk at all, any dairy. And then if I got raw dairy, I was able to tolerate it just fine. No symptoms, like no discontent at all. And really the main difference there's misfolded proteins and other stuff also, but you're going to get a much higher concentration of enzymes in the raw milk that hasn't been heated and pasteurized to 100 and some odd degrees.
Exactly. And so, and not to disparage the sophistication of cooking and storing of food, we've solved a lot of starvation problems throughout history with that. So we just have to realize with every technological innovation, there are advantages and disadvantages. And sometimes we don't know what the disadvantages are until generations later because there was some assumptive aspects built in with the old system that weren't present. So new technology brings forth new challenges, and that's just part of the human condition.
Yeah, wait, based on all the things you've said recently, I think you are ready to tell the Pottinger's cat study because that really nicely puts a bow on all this.
Yeah, well, Pottinger was talking about these cats. So he basically tested cats and fed them enzymatically deficient diets. And by third generation, the cats lost the ability to procreate, had strange genetic diseases, and exhibited strange sociological behavior normal to cats. Dr. Howell took Pottinger's studies and he applied this to cats, monkeys, mice, dogs, horses. And he predicted in the 40s and 50s with the conventional centralized control of farming practice that started to happen in monoculture farming and all the stuff that came in. He predicted that we would end up in the same problem in 3 generations of humans. And here we are, 3 generations of humans left. What do we see? Fertility clinics exploding all over the place. I mean, go on social media. Yep, we've got weird sociological behavior going on right now. And we have an explosion of genetic-based diseases. And he felt that a lot of that was related to enzymatically deficient components. I think there are other factors involved, and I think some people would argue that point, but I think there was some truth within what he was saying.
And the big thing that he was doing was cooking the food. Is that what it was?
Correct. So you never see a jungle cat starting a barbecue.
All right, we've gone deep enough on enzymes now. There's so much to cover in the book. I'm only 100 pages in out of, 400 and some odd. It has great diagrams and illustrations and it makes it like turning the pages fun and engaging. It's really like a compilation of so much good stuff. One thing I would like you to describe is how biological optimization resembles a casino.
So if you go into a casino, basically they've optimized the place to extract as much money from you as possible. The way the notes are, the way the lights are set up, the amount of oxygen they're putting in, the alcohol that they're doing. So the goal of the casino is to keep you in there and get as much money out of your pocket and into their bank account. That's their goal. And they've created a hyper optimized place to do that. That's why you see these big super things, from the fountains and the lights and the shows, and all of that is to do one thing: get money into their pockets. Biological optimization is the inversion of that mindset, in that I want to live as long and as strong and as healthy as possible so that I can maximize my experience of life. So I'm going to take and consistently add elements that are going to contribute to that outcome goal. So I'm trying to put as many health dollars in my biological bank account. And so that might be doing NAD treatments. It might be resistance training every day. It might be doing atmospheric cell trainer or cardiovascular training or flexibility or, mindfulness or meditation or eating organic foods or, fasting once a week. So I'm stacking the deck to give my biology the best chance to live as long and as strong as possible.
So you have this book, and I know that there's also like a second part of the whole system. I haven't checked it out yet, but what is that?
Well, we have an entire video summary of every chapter. So Matt and I are doing it so we can kind of go through all the frameworks to allow people, if they like to watch videos and stuff, we shot it in the Hollywood Hills, high definition. We have a 200-page supplement book. That way that, people who want to understand supplements, because once you start understanding genetics, and, we're making genetic tests available through the book as well, so that you can start to realize, okay, well, if you have suboptimal genes and your diet doesn't account for these things, you can pick the right supplement for you. It's not just advocating our supplement. We go into all kinds of supplements that we don't produce and other people produce and stuff. We also have another book that comes with it, which is just the summaries of the 875 scientific studies that validate what we're talking about in the book. We also have 3 cookbooks: a paleo cookbook, a plant-based cookbook, a carnivore cookbook, depending on which dietary stuff you would like. There's an app that comes with it as well, so that you want to get into tracking calories and things like that. So it's a whole universe that people can explore, and don't let the volume discourage you. The idea is that you pick the things that impose most of you. What's your goal, right? You want to lose weight. You want to build muscle. You want to be a great athlete. You want a great cognitive health. You want to live long. Pick your goal. All right. Which dietary strategy does fits, that pyramid of nutritional decisions? You're like, I just fits your macro guys. Okay, great. I'm a keto guy. Great. Here's what you do. Okay, take a genetic test. Now let's look at the suboptimal aspects of applying that diet to that goal. And then you can supplement or use biohacking technology to offset the suboptimal side and to enhance your optimal sides. And that's it. It's really that simple. And so you could, the average person might need 150 pages out of the book. But I think sophisticated people kind of dive into the whole thing because it's like a Alice in Wonderland program.
Yeah, it really is. So you and Matt have like polar opposite diets, basically. Are there any things that you guys agree on? I'm curious about what you agree on and what you disagree on in like the nutritional world.
I think the thing that we agree on is that in order for you to sustain a healthy, vibrant weight for your life, that you have to pick the diet that's right for you genetically, spiritually, culturally, emotionally, and psychologically, and correlates with your goals. The other thing is that we agree on is that you need to retain a level of openness, that you're not too attached to your current dietary strategy because that may prove to be suboptimal in another situation in life. And that can your identification with a cult, a dietary cult, or in that mentality of the do's and don'ts and the 10 commandments of whateverness, that can really compromise you later in life. Where would we disagree? I think Matt would probably say that I would benefit from animal-based proteins in my diet. He would probably say that he'd like to have some more of that. And I would probably say that people underestimate, and I believe this will be proven over time, the information transfer of various carbohydrate sources. So I think that we know that protein has a bunch of signaling. I think that different foods, different plant like carbohydrate based foods have also very sophisticated information components that may not be discovered yet.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I've actually seen some research on microRNA, and when you consume a real plant food, and within like 15 minutes, actually, I think animal foods too, but like they're different information signals. But when you consume that within 15 minutes, you have like traceable or trackable levels of microRNA in your bloodstream. Those microRNA go around and act as epigenetics, which is turning on and off the expression of certain genes. So I think that you're right. There's going to be like an explosion of interest in that, because if you can flip your genetic expression over certain things simply by eating a meal or not eating a meal, it seems like that's going to be like a really big frontier of science.
I believe so. And that's the fun part, I think, where, nutrigenomics is going, is about, okay, it's not just about my genetics. It's like, how do I activate the positive phenotypes by eating the right things, or doing the right biohacking thing, or doing the right mindfulness practice? And I think at the highest level of dietary practice, it's as much your mental awareness and your ability to influence your DNA as it is the food.
All right. You said that you take some kind of amino acids. What kind of amino acid are you using personally, or did you use?
I use a coconut-based essential amino acid group just for extra amino acids. So, for example, if I'm going to go do a hard workout, like a hard cardio run or a hard weight training session, I'll take maybe 10 grams of a coconut amino acid blend. And I find that my training performance is improved than if I don't do that. And being on a plant-based diet, I do believe that it's easy for me to fall into insufficient amino acids. And so I found that adding those in can be very helpful.
Yeah, and that would probably be more helpful for someone like you who's eating plant-based versus animal-based. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say so, because again, generally a sophisticated animal-based, and we're looking at sophisticated dietary process, because animal-based or plant-based unsophisticated is garbage. So let's be clear about that. But you know what? If you're starving for two and all is available is McDonald's is the best thing that you can possibly have, because so you have to have there's a relative level that every conversation comes in. So I don't want to make any assumptions There's no evil foods. There's just, it's like a temperature scale. There's no hot and cold. It is one single variable, but at certain points we say that's not good and this is good. And that's relative to our dietary cult values. Okay. So if I'm a health nut, then McDonald's is bad, it's evil, or chocolate cake is, the food of the devil. If I'm a plant-based person, then, beef is evil and cruel, so you start to break that down and you realize these aren't really based in science or sensibility. They're based in cultural conditioning, these subconscious memes that are making us put good, bad valuations on things. And I think on a plant-based diet, I need to be more mindful of making sure I get a sufficient amount of amino acids because, I eat a lot of plants that don't have a lot of amino acids. I don't need as much of other people, but I do need some. And so it's a great tool that I can just add and it's easy. So
I forget what it was that I read, but I recall coming across something about vegetarians who've been doing it for a long time tend to be better at like absorbing and assimilating amino acids, or like doing something like extracting more like tissue repairing nutrients from the food than, say, meat eaters or someone who gets a lot of like preformed amino acids and everything in their system.
I haven't seen that research, but what I can talk about is through observation on the other end of the extreme, which is the bodybuilding community, which for many cases, especially in the extreme levels of the professional ranks, guys are eating 300, 400, 500 grams of protein a day to sustain the muscle mass. And one of the biggest challenges within that community is digestive issues because of an excess amount of protein, and that their ability actually to absorb and utilize that protein actually diminishes over time. And so that goes back directly, I think, to digestive health. So going back to, your state of enzymatic variety, hydrochloric acid, and your microbiome are going to determine how effective. And over time, those tend to degenerate as we get older, especially if you're not doing regular detoxification of the intestinal tract, that I think is valuable for most people in this day and age.
Yeah. And yeah, so if you consume a ton of protein, you're going to be getting kind of a buildup of ammonia. And when the protein's digested, some like more toxic byproducts than you get if you consume fats or carbohydrates predominantly. But like, of course, everything in moderation, especially protein and all macros. But it seems like for most people, too much protein is less of an issue than not enough, or amino acids specifically.
Yeah. And just on that ammonia issue, one of the things that I noticed when I went from a meat eating diet to a plant-based diet is a major change in my sweat. My sweat didn't smell like it used to. It had a high ammonia before, really bad. And when I went to a plant-based diet, that didn't happen. Now, that may be unique to myself or the way I metabolize foods, and maybe I'm more agreeable to a plant-based diet, which is not intuitive considering I've got like all Northern European genes. It doesn't look that way, but hey, you never know about these things, right? You got to experiment.
And so unrelated, but I take Masszymes generally and sometimes Capex at the same time as I'm using essential amino acids. And I'm not sure if that's counterproductive or if it's going to be more productive.
No, it'd be more productive. So anytime that you're using these, it's just going to help convert those into the units that you want. So
yeah, and I think one of the benefits of proteolytic enzymes is that I forget what the name for it is, but when you have protein in the bloodstream, that's like a hallmark of aging, and that's usually facilitated by poor digestive abilities or like a leaky gut or anything like higher intestinal permeability. When that happens and your body identifies the protein in the bloodstream and attacks it and causes inflammation and all kinds of problems. And so proteolytic enzymes can help clear that protein out of the blood.
100%. And it's one of the things that I noticed as an athlete when I was in my late 20s and was consuming massive amounts of protein. I started to notice I'd get joint pain and achiness in my joints, almost not like arthritis, but there was an achiness as I was lifting hard and heavy. And as I started using digestive enzymes and stuff later on in my career, I don't have any of those problems. I'm now in my 50s and I don't experience any of those problems, which is truly remarkable.
So for someone with like, I don't want to say joint pain, but stiffness and possibly like really sore muscles and everything, like say they have some like problems with mobility, could enzymes help them?
There is evidence that would do that. Of course, I think you want to look at, and I just discovered this recently. I went to an osteopath and he explained to me that trauma on the tissues is kind of like a buckyball and like Buckminster Fuller balls. And he said, you'll get a collapsing of that. And that may impact blood flow. It may impact fascia. It could impact oxygen. There's all these different areas. You don't have enough energy to prop that up. That's why they do osteopathic treatments or procaine injections or ways of removing the trauma so that the cells reinflate back to their natural state without that traumatic injury. So that's what happens with injuries. And I can say that I had some stiffness, particularly in my right leg, and that really showed up when I ran a marathon for the first time last year. That's where I started to cook. I went and had this osteopath work on me just a couple months ago, and I could not believe in one session the range of mobility that happened in my tissue. Now, this had nothing related to my digestive system, had nothing related to enzymes. It was just a trauma that I wasn't able to overcome. That being said, there's a lot of evidence about proteolytic enzymes accelerating healing and the recovery of scar tissue. I've got hundreds of examples of that in my own life of clients and friends that have seen that efficacy in their own world.
Yeah. But you wouldn't want to take that right after, like, say you get a big cut, because would that impair the clot formation?
I don't think you'd have to worry too much about it. Although if you were taking like massive amounts of enzymes, you will have thinner blood. And I know this for a fact. My dad suffered from cardiovascular disease and had 20% blood flow and was chopping down trees in the backyard when he realized, oh, something's not working right. They brought him into the hospital and the doctor's like, how are you alive? I don't know anybody that could be out, chopping down trees with 20% blood flow in your heart. He's like, are you doing anything? And my dad's like, well, I take these enzymes that my son gives me every day. He's like, that's probably keeping your blood thin enough that you could get enough oxygen.
And you also just mentioned a minute ago something I found unusual. Bodybuilders tend to be very anti-cardio, and you just said that you did a marathon.
Yeah. So once again, I got done the Mr. Olympia last year, and I said, well, going back to that contrarian thing, well, they say bodybuilders can't run marathons and they're not supposed to do it. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't I go try that? So I started training for a marathon and I ran a half, and then I ran a marathon within 6 months. I had no experience, 50 years old, and said, yeah, I can do this. So again, I don't like creating proclamations out there that limit us. And with Matt and I, what's been great, because we came from such different camps, we were forced to deal with our own biases and realize this isn't a truth. It's just a collected group of artifacts reinforced by a cultural community with which I identify with, and are backing up my biases with scientific evidence and all this sort of stuff. And then I started to realize, or both of us did, wait a second, why are we having all these diet wars and these arguments about these things that really don't matter? Why don't we just strip all that away and get to the truth? And how to let people choose whatever diet's right for them, just how to be successful on it based on their goals. And that was the foundation of the book.
It's so liberating to know that I really thought strongly about this. Okay, well, the person standing right next to me, my good friend, my business partner, he's doing the opposite of me and also getting great results. How can that be given my set of values, my set of like beliefs and expectations? And yet here he is doing the opposite and getting great results also. So it's like, okay, well, I can do what makes sense to me. I can test and experiment and find out and open up all these doors. Whereas the typical diet mentality is like narrowing the blinders, focusing full steam ahead on this one particular thing, ignoring all the other evidence that doesn't fit my own narrative. So it's cool to see that you guys with this book are actually opening, making it more or less restrictive, even though it's in the guise of a diet book. What else is important to cover in your recent book? I know that people are going to want to know about the two primary goals of like entertaining diets in the first place, and that is putting on muscle or losing weight. But like, what would you say your top takeaways there are?
First off, all diets work for a while. And I think the weight loss industry has done the world a big disservice because it's focused on calories in versus calories out. And we identify that that works for a while, but the problem is that your metabolism starts to adjust to down regulation of the calories. Now, this is where the bodybuilding history really helped out. The worst bodybuilders on the planet get in better shape than the general public ever will do. You can go to any local amateur contest, and the worst bodybuilder on stage is probably in better shape than most people as far as body fat level. And we have an obesity crisis. So how is it that all these people with all these different genetics are able to do this? Because they understand the calories in, calories out. But bodybuilders focus a lot on boosting their metabolism while in a calorie restricted environment. And most diet strategies just focuses on the calories in, calories out. And so we identify how to strategically keep your metabolism high through a dietary process, both in the short term, medium term, as well as long-term results, kind of locking in that final form. So that's a big, big reveal. The second one I would say, and
before you go on, what is like the TLDR, the essence of reverse dieting? Because I'm sure people are going to be hearing this for the first time and they're going to be wanting to know what exactly it is that they're doing.
We're on the same page because that was the next thing I was going to talk about. So going back to my 2000 Universe story, 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow because I was on an extended diet for a long time in a suboptimal dietary strategy. I was starving. I felt terrible. It was miserable. I had no energy, but that was what was accepted to do at that time. When I came out of it, my starvation response activated so high that I couldn't stop eating. My metabolism and my digestive thing, and I gained 42 pounds in 11 weeks from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. So what we realized later on is that most people who follow diets like on The Biggest Loser or whatever, they lose all the weight, but then they go back to the next thing. So we believe in setting a goal immediately after or before you even hit your final form. Like, let's say your weight's to get to this point, set another goal at that so that I want to maintain this weight for the rest of my life. So if I've done a calorie restriction and a high metabolic output, I need to gradually take probably as much time as I took to lose that weight is to recomp out of that, to gradually add calories back into the diet that doesn't trigger my metabolic response where I'm gaining body fat, or gradually drop off exercise at the same rate until I hit my ideal weight and it becomes normal, and that becomes my body's set point. And strategically, nobody talks about this in dieting. Getting to the goal is all that's mattered. What happens after? And the reality is 97% of people who start a diet will end up gaining all the weight back within 3 years. And that's on everybody in the diet industry because we haven't given them the whole story. It's not about just getting to the weight. It's what you do when you get there is more important than how you got there. Now it's like, how are you going to stay here in the long term and be able to have a functional life?
So let's do some back of the napkin math. Like, how many calories are you going under your maintenance when you're cutting initially? And then also, are you doing any refeeds or anything like throughout? Are you like every month, are you adding a high calorie day back in so your metabolism doesn't downregulate in the first place?
Yeah, great example. So generally for men, I feel that 500 to 1,000 calorie deficit a day in combination between diet and exercise is optimal. So, for example, if you're having say, 250 calorie deficit from your basic metabolic rate, and you got a 250 calorie exercise rate, that's about 500 calories a day. It's about a pound of body fat a week. That's reasonable for most people. If you're really gung-ho and really going for it, you can do 1,000. Like a bodybuilder type diet will typically look at 1,000 calorie deficit a day, 500 from diet, and 500 excess calorie burn from exercise. That's about all that's sustainable psychologically before you start tripping all the defense mechanisms inside of the body. So that would be about a 2 pounds of body fat loss a day, not 2 pounds of weight. Like people can go on a ketogenic diet, for example, drop 7 pounds in a week. Most of it's water. Okay. Or some people will start a weight training. A lot of young ladies will start a diet. They'll start a diet and have to eat all this extra food and intestinal bulk for the first few weeks, as well as maybe adding muscle mass if they haven't done exercise before. They start weight training, they start building muscle. 3 weeks later, they're weighing 5 pounds heavier. Now, their lean body mass, the body fat ratio might have changed in a positive direction, but they're looking at just the scale. So, this is where things like DEXA scans become very critical because you're watching your body fat, your muscle mass, and your bone density so that you're seeing all those three things track so that you stay efficient in that model. For women, about 250 to 500 calories is sufficient. Again, oftentimes you're dealing with smaller body mass. So I'm really, really wary of ladies going on those restrictive calorie diets, especially when they're younger. You see all the disasters in the fitness world, fitness competitors and stuff, because women at that age are supposed to have higher levels of body fat because it's optimal for having children. And when they reduce that, they run into a lot of hormonal problems that you can't diet your way out of. Now you have hormonal dysregulation. So we concentrate on keeping your hormones optimal, keeping your exercise optimal, and your calorie restriction just enough that you can maintain that other side without starving yourself. And that's kind of the strategies that we outline in the book.
Do you ever do cyclical refeeds, like say once a month or once a week or something?
Yeah. And the cyclical refeeds are going to be dependent on a couple of things. So the best guy to ever write about it is Scott Abel. And he was my coach for many years and was blowing people's minds with single digit body fats. And once a week, he'd be eating like 10,000 calories a day for a day. But he would be in this calorie deficit every day up to that. And he talks about it in his book, Slingshot Diet, and his metabolic stuff. It's brilliant, brilliant work. Scott's a real genius on it. But when people start a dietary program, you can go about 12 weeks, depending on where their body fat level is. And then I would start, that's about the long as I would go without doing refeeds for that metabolic boost. For most people, get the momentum on your diet without breaking it too soon, because oftentimes you need a bit of an extended period of time to break the dietary habits, like the addictive nature of food. So, that 6-12 weeks oftentimes will help you get rid of the addictive side of it. Metabolically, you might do better if you had a boost sooner, but the addictive nature of your old eating pattern needs to be overcome first. So I would rather go a little bit restrictive, but at 12 weeks is sufficient enough. And then your refeeds, I suggest, for most people, you can start with a meal or a day. If you do it earlier, do one meal a week. We have a refeed meal. Like, so, and if you get as much as 12 weeks going in, doing a refeed, once a week, I think is a really great psychological break and can have metabolic benefits. Again, we kind of outline in the book how to track that to see what's going to work for you, because everybody's metabolism is different, their age, their genetics, what their exercise program is, all that. And so, you want to be always calibrating to where you are at any given time.
That's a good reminder, because it's I forget the addictive nature of food and like the common patterns and like the psychological, and like, yeah, it's great to do it, like say once a week if you're like been on this journey for a long time, you understand it. But if you're just getting started, you definitely want to take that longer period to kick the habit completely, let your microbiome adjust and your hormones stabilize and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I found, because like the food is hyper addictive, like the hyper palatable addictive foods. And I'm a foodie, man. Like I'm not here to tell everybody I'm not genetically superior. I got lousy genetics. I love junk food. I love all that sort of stuff. I'll eat my face off with the best of them. So like both Matt and I are really clear about like the downsides of all those things and have gotten ourselves into trouble in the past because of it.
Yeah. One other tip on this front too is if DEXA scans are unavailable to assess your body composition, whether it's muscle or water or body fat, another good one, it's not as good, not as accurate, but it's much more practical if you want to get like an at-home scale would be, what's it called? Bioelectric impedance analysis, BIA, I think is what it is. And it's not nearly as accurate as DEXA, which is like considered the gold standard, but it helps you see that at home. And again, you don't want to be doing it weighing yourself every day because there's a lot of fluctuations just from water weight alone, for example, and you can see big differences from day to day, and that's not necessarily indicating progress. Okay, so that's weight loss, fat loss. Then on muscle building, since you have lots of experience in that realm as well, any big tips there? Oh, and before we go on, what's your take on the importance of amino acids during both of these for body fat loss and also for obviously muscle building?
Well, the beauty of amino acids in those situations is that it improves satiety. That's the big factor. And satiety, I think, is a big factor in maintaining the dietary strategy that you're going on, because we're biologically programmed to eat more than we need because that's a survival mechanism. And amino acids assist in the recovery of tissues, especially if you're in a strength training muscle building program. So the first and foremost thing that I would say on a muscle building program is, number one, get a professionally designed training program. Any program will work in a beginner for maybe the first 6 months to a year. You could just pick up the weights in the gym and carry them around and probably gain 10 pounds of muscle. That becomes a lot more difficult over time. So have a professionally designed training program that's based on your individual biomechanics. If you have aesthetic goals, that it's designed around optimizing your aesthetics, or if you have performance goals based on a sport or something or lifestyle that you want to do, you want to include all of those factors. And that's why getting a professional to design a program for you is a smart move. It will help reduce injuries, help produce better results, and help you get there faster and take a lot of the thinking work out of that. And so you're not just leaning on bro science or what worked for, the jacked guy in the gym. That's primary, first and foremost. Second, you want to be monitoring your dietary habits from the get-go. Most people, if you ask them about their diet, they go, yeah, I eat pretty good. You write that down for a week or 2 weeks, and you start to realize you don't eat that good. So dietary consistency, and for gaining muscle, unless you're some sort of genetic freak, the reality is regular food feedings throughout the day in combination with a robust training system are a must. In fact, it's better to miss a training session than an eating session if you are trying to gain muscle. And we know this from animal studies, force feeding animals and stuff like that. They all get bigger. If you don't force feed the animal, they don't. Now, in some people, particularly a lot of people who suffer from not having enough muscle or having a hard time building muscle, is if you look at their eating psychology, is they're just not a type of person that gets hungry that often. You have to build that into your accountability network, and then you have to overcome your either biological or psychological biases.
Accountability network. I like that idea. How do you recommend people do that? Because that's a really important concept for all health related stuff. And it's not as discussed as it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah. So when you're talking about your accountability network, is you have to understand how your psychology is. So some people will do better by making a public declaration that they're going to do by this. Some people need to have skin in the game. So they're going to have a bet. For example, they're going to have to see some sort of important, humiliating social loss that they couldn't possibly happen, like donating money to the political candidate that they hate if they don't hit that goal. They need something both on the attractive side that is inspiring, and something on the reprehensible side that will allow them to continually stay on their program. Second thing is, I do believe, if and most people have struggled in this, if you haven't got to this area in your life at this point in Gage, chances are you're going to need some help, and you're going to need something that you're accountable to on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis at the minimum. So when I'm getting ready for a major competition or doing something, I've got a coach, I've got a dietary. I made a public declaration. I know I'm going to show up on this stage with shining lights and a marble bag. Like, if I'm fat, everybody in the audience is going to know, right? If I, so the reality is whatever makes you accountable. Some people like to have a group that they they go to. So, for example, one of the reasons CrossFit has become so popular is not because of the safety of the exercise environment, because I don't think it's that safe, but it's hard to argue with the social cultural connection that makes people coming back and feeling that they're part of something. And that's so people who gravitate to that social cultural aspect of going to CrossFit, they want to keep going back to that environment, or maybe going to their martial arts. Or for me, I like individual expertise. That's kind of hard. That just gives me zero flexibility, no acknowledgement, nothing. Just, and Scott was my coach for years, and he's that guy. He's like the Bill Belichick of bodybuilding. You know what I mean? He's like, if you, I think I got 3 compliments from him in my life, in my entire career. And I cherish every one of those. Some people like somebody that boosts them up. So you got to pick the right coach, the right accountability system. And that also goes with your family. If you're going to make these, most people's families will throw them off and they blame their family. And it's like, hey guys, this is important to me. I'm not going to be eating and doing the same things you are, because I need to hit this goal, because this goal means a lot to me, and I need you to help support me. Don't make fun of me. Don't put me down. Rather, I love your care, your love, your support, and your attention. And getting that buy-in for people and will be transformative for your relationships, as well as their awareness about what you're doing.
That one especially, it seems like a small thing, but it really, like, the environment you're in makes all the difference in terms of like how you end up showing up and if you're able to complete your goals or not.
Exactly.
Cool. Wait, well, we're going to start to wind down now. If people are interested in using some BiOptimizers products to help with their digestion or their body transformation goals, what do you recommend? Because I personally, whenever I have my bigger meals, my off day meals, I like that you don't use the word cheat meals, because I don't like that word exactly either. But I use Blood Sugar Breakthrough, and I'm curious because I know certain glucose disposal agents harm or can potentially blunt the hormetic beneficial effects of training. Does Blood Sugar Breakthrough have that issue, or am I good to use it on the same day that I've been training?
One of my close friends, Crosby Taylor, who is the cookie guy, he swears by Blood Sugar Breakthrough before all his workouts and pumps ups. And the guy, I mean, if you see this guy, he is a physical specimen. Looks great. He loves the pumps. He says, like, the pumps he gets, his ability to manage his blood sugar, because he has a cookie company and stuff, and the guy's just shredded. So I think that Blood Sugar Breakthrough is truly a breakthrough blood sugar product, and that it can enhance your results in the gym. Again, use a continuous glucose monitor and test it and see those responses. There's going to be certain foods that may be less responsive than others, and certain people that'll be less responsive than others, but most people will see a benefit on the Blood Sugar Breakthrough. Digestive health, we have enzyme solutions for every type of diet. We have Capex for ketogenic people. We have Vegzymes for plant-based guys. We have Masszymes, which is the all-encompassing super enzyme formula. It's our most popular enzyme ever. If you're going to eat some gluten, Gluten Guardian is really great. That's a favorite. If we're going out for pizza and stuff, I stuff a few of those in my face before I go out there and enjoy my pizza. And then, your probiotics. P3OM is the best probiotic out there. We've tested everything out there as far as breaking down proteolytic organisms and other undigested protein in the intestinal tract.
So it's almost like a probiotic and an enzyme all in one.
Well, it's a proteolytic probiotic. Most probiotics aren't don't break down protein. It does, and that has some. We're not even allowed to say on the radio or on the news or on the social media, whatever, what was proven in the U.S. patent with this product.
I've actually read that patent, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Crazy. It's crazy. But it's an amazing product to keep to fighting off the bad guys, and it is undefeated against food poisoning. People get food poisoning. I take a handful of P3OM immediately, do another 30 minutes later and a couple hours later, and you will not have a problem. I've seen people on the floor ready to go to the hospital. 30 minutes later, they're dancing on the dance floor.
And it's a much better solution than activated charcoal too, which indiscriminately binds to everything, including vitamins and minerals and stuff that you do want to absorb too.
Exactly. So that's been great. Stress Guardian's a new product that we came out with. If you're clocked up or you're using a lot of nootropics or caffeine or stimulants, you take some of that later in the day and it just clocks you down in a really nice way.
I really like that one. I was part of your beta testing group, and I'd make my own like adaptogens, like herbal tinctures and supplements and everything. And I have like 25 different things all in one. And I was like, finally, a product that makes it so I don't have to mix my powders and bulk do them. And so I can just take one serving and replace all of that.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it too, because I'm the same way. Like I love playing around with stuff, but it was just convenient. And it was put together by a Chinese master herbalist. So, and again, with all our products, we're able to, with our lab in Bosnia, we're able to test the quality of the raws. This is way beyond lab assays. We're able to see what the probiotics are doing. We're able to see if it gets delivered into the cells. So it allows us to produce products that simply other companies couldn't possibly do because they're not able to break down the efficacy of the raws. Microbiome Breakthrough, that's a game-changing product that helps repair the intestinal lining. We just found a new source on that for the building the biofilm that's even better than the one before. So really excited about that product. A lot of people who have leaky gut and stuff swear by that. So yeah, I think there's a product, and of course magnesium. Everybody uses our magnesium. Every person on the planet seems to be using our magnesium nowadays. We've got the best magnesium on the market, Mag Breakthrough. Our sleep products are really nice. People have trouble sleeping. And some of our nootropics and Nootopia brands are really wild too. If you're a little bit more lenient on some of the things, we're moving everything to GRAS certification on that. So yeah, so it's been an ongoing project. We bought a company and we're going through that whole process with them. But we have a Nootopia, we have a Collagenous product, which is a blend of mushrooms, and these are 100-to-1 concentrations. So every serving is like getting 1.5 pounds of these like really potent mushrooms. So from a BDNF aspect, you take that in the morning. I actually mix it with my protein breakthrough and my microbiome breakthrough and my enzymes. I make a little pudding, and I'm just flying on that stuff afterwards. So yeah, that's a great combo.
I love that combo. I added some of that into my coffee this morning, the Collagenous, and then I had my power solution, Nootopia power solution, maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and it's the perfect way to start my day. I just did 10-12 days of no caffeine as a quarterly tolerance reset, and it's like the perfect way to get back into it.
Right on, man. I love that.
Yeah. Where are your enzymes derived from? I've gotten that question before and I didn't know what to say.
Well, our enzymes, so if you go into the world of enzymes, they're all going to be derived from a cultured fermented process. So some of them are going to come from various mushroom stocks or like bacteria culture, these type of things. So proteolytic enzymes come from one place, amylolytic enzymes come from other, cellulase comes from. So there's a massive array. We've literally contacted, I think, every major supplier and some minor suppliers around the world to get these different enzymes. And even if they're coming from a fungus, people go, "Oh, I don't want any fungus in my diet." What you have to recognize is the fungus. The extraction process is just extracting the pure enzyme out of it. So it's not going to cause any problems if you have like mold issues or things like that. So a lot of people worry about that, but it's not an issue.
What about porcine derived enzymes? Are those at all similar, different class, or what?
Yes. So you have plant-based enzymes. You have animal-based enzyme, which porcine would be an animal-based, for example. You have systemic enzymes, and then you have cultural enzymes. And so a plant-based enzyme usually has a wider range where it's effective in pH. Animal enzymes are usually in a lower pH range, that they're like a very low bandwidth. And then you have a systemic enzyme, which is an enzyme that may be derived from either a plant, an animal, or synthesized. And that enzyme is usually not used in digestion. It's just taken and used in for as like a systemic enzyme for various functions. And then you have a cultured enzyme. And a cultured enzyme would mean that you are growing the fungus or the bacteria or the mushroom or whatever in a very specific environment that are going to enhance its enzymatic capacity. And then you extract the enzymes out of that. So you're going to get about somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times more powerful of an enzyme by using a cultured enzyme over, say, a plant or an animal-based enzyme.
All right, cool. I heard Matt speak on another podcast, and he mentioned that Capex can help break down seed oils.
Yeah, so that was just recently proven in our microbiology lab. And, we hear all this bad stuff about seed oils. Well, we have 4 different types of lipases, which are different types of lipolytic enzymes. And what was remarkable is that we were able to demonstrate in the lab that we were able to completely knock out all of the negative components of seed oils if Capex is taken with it. Now, that's not getting it out of the tissues if it's already there, but you will not suffer the negative consequences if you're using Capex around seed oils. So if you're out there and you're going for the snack attack with the seed oils on it, take your Capex beforehand and you should be good to go.
That is really cool. I did not know that, and I will have to be adding that. So when I go out to restaurants, a lot of times I'll take Blood Sugar Breakthrough, and I'll try and take something to like reduce the oxidation of the polyunsaturated fats, the PUFAs, and it looks like Capex will be joining my pre-restaurant meal stack.
Yeah, it's a great addition, right?
Yeah. Well, wait, I have a couple more questions for you, but if people want to connect with you to try some BiOptimizers products, to grab your latest and greatest book, in my opinion, that is, how can they go about that?
Well, I think if you go to the ultimatenutritionsystem.com/Nick Urban, put in Nick Urban, got ahead of myself there. You'll get a little discount on the project. You can follow us on BiOptimizers. We do all the social media stuff and all that sort of stuff, and we're pretty easy to find.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think that if you use the code URBAN in the BiOptimizers shop in general, that'll save you on anything you get from them. So thank you guys. Thank you for setting that up. And now, if there was a worldwide burning of the books and all knowledge on Earth was lost, but you get to save the works of 3 teachers, who would you choose and why?
Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force and created a whole system of conscious calibration through kinesiological testing. I think his work will probably be considered one of the most profound works from centuries to come. Probably the complete works of the Buddha. If you look at the most comprehensive and easier to understand than perhaps maybe the Hindu philosophy that is, the Sanatana Dharma, which has existed, the Vedas and all that sort of stuff, but oftentimes that gets lost. And the third piece of information, I'd have to say that the essential teachings of Christ, in that if we live a Christ-like life, many of the problems would go away. If we practice the Buddhist path, many of the problems would go away. And if we use that in the map of consciousness, we'd understand where everybody was, so it would be less inclined to worry about where we were or where we were going or where we're from.
Wow. Okay. Well, we will wrap this one up today with a fun fact that the BiOptimizers tribe does not know about you?
Maybe that I was an exotic dancer at one time.
That's pretty fun. Wade Lightheart, thank you for joining me on the Mind Body Peak Performance podcast. It's been an honor to host you today, to chat about your latest book, some of your breakthrough products, and just to reconnect.
Always a slice. Thanks so much for having me, and really appreciate taking the time. Great questions.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.